Okay, we'll officially call the meeting of the Bristol, Tennessee, Virginia Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant Oversight Committee to order. The first item of business is to read the statutory authority for both Virginia and Tennessee that enables us to conduct this meeting electronically. In Tennessee Executive Order number 60, and Virginia House Bill 29 suspended state law in reference to open meetings to the extent necessary to allow governing bodies to conduct their essential business by electronic means rather than being required to gather a quorum of members physically in the same location. The governing body shall make a determination that that meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare for all concerned in light of the COVID-19 outbreak. At this time, it'd be appropriate for the members to discuss whether they believe that meeting electronically is necessary and vote accordingly. Members do not agree that meeting electronically is appropriate at this time, then this meeting should be adjourned until such time as the members can meet in person. We have any discussion or someone to make a motion that we meet electronically?
I make a motion.
Okay, we got a motion. Is that Don?
Yes.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
That sounds like Vince. Okay.
Yes.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, opposed, like sign. All right, the next item on our agenda, annually, our bylaws require that we officially reorganize with the selection of a chairman and a vice chairman. Typically, this is always done at the first meeting of the new fiscal year, and meeting on a quarterly basis. September is that meeting. In the past, staff has served in these positions largely due to their role in developing the agenda and administrative support they have in preparing the packets. But in reality, any member of the committee could serve in the role of chairman and vice chairman. That said, is there a nomination for chairman?
I nominate Bill Sora, chairman.
That sounded like Don.
Yes.
All right. Do we have any other nominations? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, now we'll entertain nominations for a vice chairman. I'll nominate Don Bowman.
Second.
That sounded like Vince. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Do we have any other nominations? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Next item on the agenda is consideration of the minutes from the June 15th meeting. Do we have any corrections, additions, deletions, or a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
All right, we have a motion to approve.
I'll second.
We have second that sounded like Malin.
It's Gary Baker.
Okay.
Either one.
Okay. All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 We have no old business. We have two items of new business. I guess this is really the first item is consideration for a capital improvement plan for the 5-year period beginning in 2022 and extending through 2026. Annually, as we move forward in the development of our budget, and typically you'll see the cities do this a little bit later in the year, but meeting on a quarterly basis, it's helpful for us to get this business out of the way during our September meeting. But staff, and this is primarily Matt Dake along with Will Witcher, will review the capital needs of the plant and develop a plan for moving forward. Matt, would you like to review the capital improvement plan for us?
Sure. Yes, I will. Okay, this goes from fiscal year 2022 to 2026. Year one is the one that we're considering right now, and got several items on here. There's 4. One of them, the first one is purchase a spare surge basin pump. We've got 2 pumps in that's associated with the surge basin. They were both installed in 2003. They're 17 years old. There's been several occasions where we've only had one pump operational because of maintenance on one. So if we got into a high flow situation, big storm event, and we had one of those pumps out, that could lead to an overflow at the main lift station. And we want to avoid that if we can. So I think it'd be really good if we had a spare pump in here. They're both working currently, but we just never know when one of those could drop out. So I've got that in there at $60,000. They're pretty expensive pumps. They're very large, 165 horsepower. The second item is to paint the interior of the primary pump building. It's it's got 5 pumps in it. They're the primary sludge pumps. It's got a drain pump. It's got some scum pumps in there. And it's been several years since this has been painted. On the ceiling, the paint's starting to peel off, and we scrape it off when we can, but it still keeps peeling off. So that really needs to be surface prepped well and then painted. The piping, the floor, the ceiling. I have $30,000 budgeted for that. And then at our Sinking Creek pump station, that's jointly owned, that was installed in the mid-1980s. It's got one of these built-up roofs. It's currently not leaking, but it's starting to show its age a little bit. So I think it'd be good to get that on the capital plan to go ahead and replace that. There's a lot of electrical components in that room, and we certainly don't want to have any kind of leaks onto those. And the Buffalo Road sampling station is between here and Boone Lake. It used to be in service at we captured our fecal coliform samples and total residual chlorine samples. It's currently not being used, but it's still there, and it's a valuable asset if we needed to use it. So we need to keep it maintained. It's got one of the built-up roofs too, same age as probably the plant. I don't know. I think it was installed the same time as the plant. So, that's pushing 50 years now. So the other item, we've got 4 final clarifiers. Each one of these clarifiers has an activated sludge valve attached to some piping that comes from it over to the wet well. These valves were installed, a couple of them originally in '73 and a couple of them in the mid-'80s during phase 2 expansion, plant expansion. And they're critical to the operation of these clarifiers. And one of them right now is broken open. There's a pin in it that's broken where the valve stays open all the time, which means we can use the clarifier. So we've got it online, but we need to try to fix it in the interim. And then we need to replace these valves, because if one of these valves were to break when it was closed, we wouldn't be able to use the clarifier. And if it was to break when it was open, we could still use the clarifier, providing the clarifier was operating properly. So these are critical to the operation of these clarifiers, and I think we need to go ahead and replace those. We've got some prices on the valves. They're large valves. There's 3 18-inch valves, and one of them's a 14-inch valve. They're about 12 to 15 feet down into the ground, so it's going to have to be excavated, and then those valves replaced. And we'll have to, of course, operate the plant while we're replacing these valves. So that's going to be a bit tricky, but I think we can figure that out. Valves themselves are about around $40,000 to replace all of them, just to buy the valves, and then all the excavation. It's in a kind of a tricky place to excavate. There's a lot of piping and things like that. So, but anyway, that's for the first year. The second year is to replace the metal components of the primary number 1 clarifier. Original equipment put in '73. Primary 2 number clarifier, it's also original equipment, and it's put in '73 as well. And then primary number 3, it was put in the mid-'80s, but that's still 35 years old now. So we'd like to replace those before they failed. And so have money budgeted for those. And in year 2026, replace final number 1 mechanisms. We did quite a bit of mechanical work on that about 2 years ago, but I think we need to put this on the capital sometime into the future where we can have it budgeted in case we need to replace that. Additional items, we've got the bar screens that need to be worked on. They're going to be considered in some other capital items we'll be talking about later. And then the chlorine contact chamber wall tops need to be refurbished, and we need to evaluate the asphalt pavement around the facility. But, you know, the first year is pretty well set in stone unless something really major comes up. But as the years progress, it's a little bit more fluid. We see needs arise that we may not have anticipated at this time. So anyway, I would recommend that that the committee approve this plan. Any questions?
Let me mention as far as funding, and remind the committee members, the city of Bristol, Tennessee, and BVU each contribute $250,000 annually to capital maintenance or capital improvements at the plant. As you can see, the plant, the minor things they're included as part of Infomark's operational contract, but there's a lot of things that we do at the plant that you would consider high dollar maintenance items. So we typically, out of that 500,000 that's contributed collectively between the two entities, anywhere between 200 and 250,000 is set aside annually to do those high dollar maintenance items to preserve the plant. And then the balance of those funds are placed into an account that's used for larger items, such as the dewatering system that we talked about at our June meeting. If you recall, we had a study of our dewatering system, really from the headworks of the plant on, and a portion of that conversation is the next item on the agenda. But that's how we fund these improvements. As we get into the financial study, Tara typically reviews the amount of funds that we have in retainage in there to devote to items such as the dewatering process, grit repairs to the grit chamber, or not repairs, but replacement of the grit chamber and so forth. Are there questions, Matt, on the CIP?
Got one question, Matt, on the painting of the interior walls and such. Do you anticipate any of that paint being a lead-based type that's got to be scraped, removed, or are we way past that era?
I think we're way past that, but we will have that checked. We usually, whoever is interested in bidding on it, we usually get samples of that and send it off and have it analyzed. We've not found any recently in any of the repainting jobs we've done, so I don't really anticipate that.
Okay, good.
I would say if you found something there, it would probably be more in the piping than it would be the walls. I would guess on that. But Matt's right. We'd end up doing a T-clip analysis on that paint to determine the lead levels before painting, to determine what type of abatement would have to be done. All right, I think, are there other questions for Matt? And if there aren't any, what I'd like to entertain a motion to accept the FY22 capital improvement plan as submitted.
Make a motion to approve capital improvement plan as submitted.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Ms. Gary.
Okay. Okay. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, next item on the agenda deals with an engineering services agreement. This is preliminary engineering design for a new grit system, and Will Witcher has done most of the heavy lifting on this project. So, Will, would you like to review this for the committee?
Sure, I'd be glad to. I'm going to share my screen real quick. I have a brief PowerPoint presentation just to kind of refresh everyone's memory on from what we discussed at the last meeting. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. As Bill mentioned, and you all remember the last meeting in June, we had a consultant come in and present the findings of their preliminary report on upgrades to the grit and the biosolid dewatering systems. And as part of that, we're now moving into the design phase for phase one, which includes upgrades to the grit system. Let me advance my slide here real quick. The grit system is necessary to remove large particles from the influent wastewater. And grit basically consists of sand, gravel, and other large inorganic solids that come through the headworks at the plant. Pretty much anything that doesn't pass through a large screen but is too large to settle out in the primary clarifiers. And the existing grit system that we are currently using was installed in the mid-1980s during the plant upgrade that was completed at that time. So we're talking about 35 to 40-year-old equipment, which in the wastewater treatment environment has quite some age on it. And over the past 35 years or so, the nature of our influent wastewater has changed, and it's basically rendered the existing equipment not quite obsolete, but it's getting to the end of its service life. So this is a very important piece of the plant that needs to be upgraded, because basically it's the first line of defense for the rest of the treatment train as the wastewater passes through the plant. This is an aerial view of the plant just to kind of give you an idea of where the grit system is located in relation to the rest of the plant. As you can see up here at the top, we've got the grit removal system, and what happens is wastewater passes through the main lift station, which is below and out of the picture here. It's up to the headworks up to the grit system, where the grit is removed from the influent. And like I said, that's the very first line of treatment in the process. So it is very important. And then after the grit is removed from the system, the influent passes through the primary clarifiers, where the other organic solids are settled out of the wastewater, and then they are pumped into the biosolids dewatering facility, where basically the sludge is dewatered and then dried out, and then land applied after it's been treated. So effectively, we're looking at these two systems in this part of this overall project. The first would be the grit removal system, because it is important that it be upgraded first, because the biosolids dewatering is contingent upon the proper grit removal efficiencies in the plant. Let me advance this out here. This is a picture of the existing system that we have in place. We have a Pista Grit 270 system, which is a good technology, but like we've mentioned, it's kind of gotten to the end of its useful life. This is a pretty substantial piece of the treatment. You can see this is a relatively large dewatering or grit removal system here. And the lower picture here kind of shows you some of the problems we're having right now. You see excess water accumulation. This is the dumpster, where once the grit is removed, it's discharged into this dumpster. And ideally, there should be very little to no water in the dumpster, but that's just kind of one of the indicators of the issues that we're having here. So upgrade of the grit system is the first thing that we're planning to undertake. How this all fits into the project timeline, we are getting into preliminary design. In fact, the proposal that is before you today will take the project through preliminary design. The report that you all received back in June is effectively about a 10% design report. And what that means is it's very conceptual in nature. We've identified the project constraints, we've identified the primary technology options, and then we put together very preliminary cost estimates. So the first phase of design will take us through about a 50% design, and when we reach the end of preliminary design, we'll have a better idea of the final cost of the project, and then we'll work out more of the technical issues associated with the design. So we anticipate completing preliminary design within the next 4 to 6 months, which would put us into winter of 2021. And then based on the recommendations of preliminary design, we'll move into final design, which should be completed by spring of next year, which would allow us to start construction on the grit system upgrades at the beginning of fiscal year 22, which would be June of next year. And then the biosolids dewatering improvement design we anticipate starting the preliminary design of that system once construction of the grit system improvements are underway, which would allow us to start construction as early as fiscal year 23. So this is kind of the phased approach that we're looking at with this project. And the proposal that you have before you is a contract for preliminary design for the grit system improvements. And with that, are there any questions?
If we have no questions, Will, then what we would like to do is have a motion to approve the engineering services contract for preliminary design with C.D. Smith out of Knoxville, Tennessee, in the amount of $108,700.
I make a motion.
We have a motion to move forward. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, since we're ready to vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Okay, this moves us then to our quarterly reports. Matt, you want to open us up with our plant operations?
Okay, this reporting period covers June, July, and August. Plant ran well. The effluent BOD averaged 6 milligrams per liter. That's a 94% reduction. TSS averaged 8 milligrams per liter, which is a 94% reduction over the influent. And to put that in perspective, the limits for BOD and TSS on a monthly average is 30 milligrams per liter, and on a daily maximum is 45 milligrams per liter. So as you can see, we were well under that. Our percent removal, daily minimum is 40%, and monthly average is 85%. As you can see, we're well above our minimum percent removals. So we did well. The flows were down some. The rainfall decreased over the spring. The flow it averaged 10.3 million gallons a day in this reporting period, and that's 10.8 in June, 10.0 in July, 10.0 in August. But it still gives us a 12-month rolling average of 13.9. And to put that in perspective, the plant is designed for 15 million gallons a day. So we're kind of bumping up at our hydraulic capacity. Our organic capacity is still well below it because when we do have these rain events, it's just rainwater we're treating. There's not any organics in it to speak of. So what that tends to do is dilute the influent, which makes it more difficult to meet our percent removal because even though we make a good product and we able to discharge low amounts of BOD and TSS, if we're comparing that to a low influent, we may not meet the percent removals on all occasions, but we did this reporting period. Does anybody have any questions on that part of it? Okay, at the main lift station, current 12-month period, we've had 3 overflows, and we had one in December, one in February, and one in April. And those were all due to these high rain events that we've had over this past couple of years. But anyway, we've not had any in this reporting period. We brought the surge basin online on 208 occasions since it was significantly completed in April of 2003. We used it on 4 occasions this period, 1 in June, 1 in July, and 2 in August. And those were all due to high flows from rain events, just to mitigate the flow. There was no dangers of overflow at that point. We just like to maintain a lower volume going through the plant. It makes the compliance a little bit easier to achieve. And it just, a steady state through the plant is what we try to achieve. So we've used that 4 times. It's been a good investment the city made in BVU to install the surge basin. However, on compliance, we did have a couple of excursions. One of them was a total chlorine residual, and it was due to a partially blocked pump. And we examined our bulk storage tank after this incident, and we noticed some material in there. It's kind of a black-looking sludge, and we got a sample of that, sent it off to be analyzed, and they found plastic particles in it. And We talked to our supplier of it, and they're begin using a finer mesh screen when they deliver this material. We're keeping a closer watch on it to make sure this doesn't happen again. We drained the tank and cleaned it out. So, we started with a fresh tank. So we've not had any problems since. That was in June when that happened. And then we had a BOD, and it was on July 4th weekend when the sample was collected. The sample was set up on the 6th, which was a Monday. It takes 5 days to run the analysis. So on Saturday morning, I was just going about my business, and I got a call from work saying that we had a BOD excursion. That was just a bolt out of the blue because the plant had been running so well. We were running average several days before was 4 milligrams per liter, and several days after was 7 milligrams per liter. And I think this was a 51 milligrams per liter. We can discharge up to 45 milligrams on any given one day. And there was a strange odor through the plant over the weekend. It was one of the local industries. But when we went to the industry after this excursion and downloaded their flow from that particular day, they had not discharged for 2 or 3 days prior to that day. And on that day, they didn't discharge. So it's kind of a mystery what happened, but it's just a peak, and then it went back down to where it should have been, or BOD discharge. So we're continuing what we've been doing. We monitor a couple of these industries on a daily basis, and we watch them pretty closely. But, it's a big collection system. If someone had discharged something illegally 5 days before we noticed it, it's really difficult to find out what happened. Land application program, we're able to dispose of 158 loads. That's 497 dry tons. We've been having some problems with our slinger truck. It's been in the shop 2 or 3 times. It's in the shop today, as a matter of fact. It's a warranty problem, something that it was repaired about 3 weeks ago, and then it broke again. So hopefully we'll get it back this week, and we'll start land applying. We've got some good weather, so we really hate to miss any time. Does anyone have any questions on this report?
Not so much a question, but point out that 13.9 flow for 12-month running average. That's a little better than 92% of our design capacity. Don, do you have any sense at all when Washington County Service Authority might be diverting their flow back out? I don't think we need to do, preferably, I don't think we need to do consideration of plant expansion as much as just tightening up the system and then diverting that flow that Washington County's putting in back toward Abingdon. Do you have a sense of that, Don?
I'm going to defer to Philip. I'm obviously very engaged in our litigation right now with the city.
Sure.
We called Washington County and got an update. So Philip, can you join us? He's having trouble with his audio.
Yeah, I spoke. Yeah, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so I spoke with Washington County just last week, and they said it was definitely still on the table, and they were looking at a little bit more information probably within the next 6 months. But I didn't get a firm date, but they said they were still had intentions on moving all that flow and taking it back to the Abingdon wastewater plant. They had a little bit of a stall because they're working on getting some money for some water line projects. That project got delayed because of the process for the construction projects. So they said they weren't as focused over the past couple months as they had been, but it's still on the table. But sadly, I don't have an exact date to give you.
Three other updates separate from them on our system. We're about done with Little Creek. We got last 1,000 feet to go there. Seeing tremendous reduction.
Yeah.
Beaver Creek, we're down to probably the last 500 to 1,000 feet. Seeing tremendous reduction.
5,000 feet.
We are probably.
I would like to.
May, June, awarding our own surge basin that will be placed along Beaver Creek that should be a design capacity of somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million that will stop that from coming online in an overflow event. It can possibly be used to manage our system better.
Good.
Those are 3 things.
But, go ahead. Sorry. I thought you were finished.
Go. This is like, go.
So Washington County, they did point out that they had replaced all their manhole lids along the creek there. They're now watertight where they wasn't watertight at all before. and they've replaced 82 cleanouts throughout the system, and they said they smoke tested the entire basin that flows into the Seeking Creek.
What did they find at the Virginia? Do you know?
There's some roof drains tied on. They haven't addressed that issue yet, but that is what they found.
That could be significant. Okay. All right. Thank you.
In addition, after we get the surge basin, the next $15 million of our improvements are in I areas. So we're going to continue to have hopefully reductions as we go through and rebuild. We've got a big section of Beaver Creek that will be up near the falls, Spring Lake, basically from American Merchant back toward exit 7, that will be probably slip lined. So we've got that on the schedule with DEQ. Everything should come up on that. Also, I checked the local rain over the weekend. We've already hit 52 inches of rain for the year, so it looks like this will be our highest year ever, going back, I think, to the 1870s. So unfortunately, maybe a new norm. This could be the third year in a row where we break new records, but we had historically done about 46 inches for the year, or slightly less, and now we're at 52 inches, and we're just halfway through September.
Right.
So that's going to be our challenge going forward.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions for Matt? Hearing none, Matt, let's move on with our industrial monitoring report.
Okay, this covers the same reporting period of June, July, and August. As I mentioned early, we had a suspected illicit discharge week of July 4th that caused us to have a BOD excursion. We had 3 notices of violation issued, and that's down from previous reporting periods by quite a bit. We had one issued to Dynamic Recycling. You can see what all their parameters were there. We had one to the Bristol, Virginia Sanitary Landfill. And then we had 3 notices of violation to American Merchant for failure to submit monthly reports for May, June, and July. But other than the illicit discharge, we didn't have any problems caused by industry. Does anyone have any questions over the NOVs?
We'll point out in the period prior to the last quarter, we did have a show cause hearing and a consent order with necessary waste oil, and reached an agreement there. We did have civil penalty that is waived if they continue a 6-month period without any additional violations. If they have additional violations during that period, then the civil penalty is applicable. So. Any other questions on our industrial monitoring? Okay, moving forward, it's Tara time.
I have one question, Bill.
Oh, I'm sorry, Malin.
I did have one question.
Okay.
On the violations, the American Merchant, just failing to submit reports for 3 months. Did they give a reason why they weren't doing that, or?
I think I'll defer that to our Virginia entity based on where that industry is located and which system permits it. They're the ones responsible for the enforcement on that. So, Philip or Don on the American Merchant.
Yeah. So this is Philip again. They had a change in management. A new manager came in. When the old manager left out, there was no discharge into the plant. New manager came in. They started discharging, and he just claimed he wasn't aware of the rules. We have since informed him of the rules. We've taken samples, and everything looks good with their operations to date. So we don't think there was actually a significant violation as far as BOD or TSS. It was just a reporting issue. But I have had a meeting with them, and they're fully aware of their responsibilities moving forward.
With the change of management, we worked with the guy that came in and started from ground one. The chair and the plant manager both were replaced. The new guy's indicated that he doesn't anticipate having a very close relationship with the EDU. He just kind of is a lot different. The other guys, we probably had weekly phone calls or text messages from him. He said, "Don't call me, I'll call you," type of thing. He's very hands off. So. But
wow.
We did engage with him, and they were not discharging before. We worked with them through the whole design of their filtration system, but it come online and we were left out of the loop.
Yeah, kind of concerning.
Yeah, well, it definitely a different management style over there than it was.
Yeah.
Any other questions on the industrial pretreatment program in the quarterly report? Okay, hearing none. Tara, tell us how much money we have.
Okay, if everyone will turn to page 1 of the report, it's the statement of net position. I'll give everyone a few minutes to turn to it. Let's see, and this is the report for June 30th. So it's the year-end report for the fiscal year. And if you look at it, the entity currently has a little over $4.5 million in the bank. There is a receivable from the City of Bristol, Tennessee Water Fund. And what that represents is the amount of EDA grants that we estimate will be able to come over to the joint sewer when we settle up how much is owed to the water segment. So we think the joint sewer will be able to recoup about $175,000 on the remaining portion of the EDA grant. And the number that Bill is referring to is at the very bottom. If you look at net position unrestricted, there's a little over 4.1 million. It's $4,106,479, which is right now sitting there for capital needs. Let's see. And if you turn to page 2 of the report, the fund ended the year with $190,138 as a positive change in net position. And what that represents is the capital contributions plus the grant. Each entity paid $275,000 in during this past fiscal year. And the net of those funding sources with the depreciation gives you the change in net position. The entities funded the operating costs for the year completely. And the only thing that remained is the transactions that relate to capital. Let's see, and the only other thing that I think is really important to point out, since this is the report for the end of the year, is right now each entity is owed a balance back of the operating contributions that have been paid in that have not been used for revenue. Bristol, Tennessee is owed back $280,703, and BVU Authority is owed back $253,498. And what I'm going to do this month is we calculate 2 months of the reserve of FY 2021's budget, 2 months of expenditures, and anything in excess of that, each entity will get a refund, because we don't want to build the balance up and just let it get bigger and bigger. So we try to, if there is an excess, give it back to each entity. But everything else is pretty straightforward. We have been conducting the audit. It should be wrapping up this week. I looked at the draft last week, and everything's in good shape. It's in review, and we hope to issue that this week. So I don't know if there's any particular questions.
Okay, if there are no questions for Tara, then that does bring us to the end of our agenda. Our next meeting will be Monday, December 21st. Hopefully we'll be able to get together in person at that meeting. If there are no other questions, we'll eat those virtual biscuits that Matt brought us, and we'll adjourn.